Hey everybody, it is me, Vincent. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to Vincent Vision. This video here is another HHN video, and I'll tell you right now, this is going to be my last HHN video for the 2024 season. We are now only halfway through the event, and within the first week of Halloween Horror Nights starting in August, I'm pretty sure there are probably over 1,000 videos on YouTube talking about the event. So I think we are good on HHN videos. So what I wanted to do for my last one was share with you guys what I think are the best and worst houses of Halloween Horror Nights 2024. My top 10. I've gotten to experience the event a lot over the past month, and while we're only halfway through, I want to talk about my thoughts and feelings on the houses this year, while also giving sort of like a recommended houses to see guide for those of you who are going in October, which in my opinion is when the event becomes much busier. So you might not be able to do them all, you might have to pick some. Hopefully this video helps you do that. For this list, I am taking into account the concepts, designs, themes of this year's haunted houses, the scare factor. I'll try to get into it throughout this video. This year does have some really great hits, but honestly, a lot more misses in my opinion. This is a really mixed year, and I don't think I'm the first person to say that. But one thing I need to add before I start is that, of course, when I talk about houses being bad, I am never talking about the characters, the performers in them. I've gotten great scares in all of the houses this year. These performers make the event what it is, and it wouldn't be the same without them. A lot of these characters are making these houses, and others are doing the best with what they can. Vincent Vision loves characters, okay? Let's get into the houses. I'm gonna try my best to start with the positives for each of the houses because there aren't any 100% bad ones this year, but my number 10 house has got to be Major Sweets Candy Factory. The positive for this house is that it is very easily the best of the 3 houses that have been in this location, and it actually has some of the nicest sets and lighting for a haunted house this year. It really does feel like you're stepping into a demented candy factory, and I think that the beginning of this house, the first 2 scenes when you're meeting Miss Treats and Major Sweets in his office, is really great. But I think after that, the house quickly devolves and ends up becoming this chaotic, confusing, and honestly kind of a super repetitive house with a bunch of super loud scares, tight spaces, and like crazy screaming kids. This house is like an assault on your senses, and not in a good way. I think they leaned a little bit too much into the factory idea of Willy Wonka as well, and I feel like we could have gotten more variety with the type of rooms that would be in a candy factory. And I know a lot of times these limitations come with the locations that haunted houses are in, and it kind of makes me want them to stop putting haunted houses here in this area because of it. What happened to the former Shrek, now Villain Con space? Did you know that the Shrek ride used to have 2 movie theaters and that they'd close one down, rip out all the seats, and build a haunted house in them for the season? And allegedly, Villain Con was built with that in mind for a 10th or 11th haunted house, but we have yet to see that happen. I think I've enjoyed the haunted houses in that location more than I've enjoyed the ones at Fast and Furious. Also, this house is so loud. There's so much dialogue in this haunted house that I don't think I've ever heard because just all the noise that's going through there. It is so loud, it is so unpleasant. Going through Major Sweets Candy Factory feels like the worst parts of a sugar rush. Now, this next house was a close contender for the number 10 spot, but edges out Major Sweets by just a little bit. Number 9 is Universal Monsters Eternal Bloodlines, a house with a really fun concept. It also continues the story of the HHN version of the Universal Monsters, but unfortunately, it kind of misses the mark. Now, what I think is cool about this house is the fact that they're trying to give us something new, and they're giving us an all-female cast and story for an HHN house. With over 200 houses in the HHN timeline, we should be seeing more unique concepts and ideas that push the envelope for what people expect in a haunted house regularly at the event. Unfortunately, the house relies a little too much on this story that they've created, and if you miss one piece of it, the entire thing falls apart and you end up with another confusing house that leaves you with more questions than answers. You see, this house has a lot of scares, but not really any scenes. Nothing continuously plays out in front of you like The Darkest Deal from 2023. All the storyline beats are played out in scares, which is fine if you're the 5% of people who go through a haunted house and get every single person to come out at you. The house makes less and less sense the more you miss, and they have these cool transitional hallways with these projection map books that try to explain what's happening, but you're not really in them for long enough to get with the program. If you don't see the daughter of Dracula come out with Saskia's head, and you just see the bride of Frankenstein screaming, "No!" it's not gonna make any sense. The whole finale of the house is also the bride coming back to the Van Helsing tomb to bury her, but again, if you miss that she's dead, it doesn't make any sense. Can I also just say that Saskia Van Helsing is like the worst monster hunter ever? The house starts with her and it makes it seem like we're supposed to be sympathetic towards her, but spoilers, she dies without killing anybody. I think she kills like one random vampire, but I couldn't tell you because I've never seen the scare play out. The only thing that has managed to be killed going through this house was the streak of great Universal monster houses at HHN. So number 8 is the Museum Deadly Exhibits. This is a house that I had high hopes for when it was first announced, but my hype died down pretty quickly once we found out this was going to be in a tent location. You see, when I think of a museum haunted house, I was expecting something big and grand, kind of like a scary version of the museum in Animal Crossing. The idea of this house, to me, sounds like it would do better in a soundstage. But I do love the idea of the rotting stone, this evil thing that corrupts and warps anything it comes in contact with. And I also think that while it could be executed better, the museum concept is clear to understand going through the haunted house. What bumps this one up above 9 and 10 is that I think the performers in this house do a really good job, and I've gotten some really good scares going through. There's a lot of intensity going through here that's on the same level of some of the other houses at the top of this list. And that's really it. This is a house that's carried by the performers. The rooms also feel pretty varied, and while I do wish there were some more cliche scares that you'd expect with a museum-based haunted house, like there should be statue people coming out at you, I think Deadly Exhibits provides a solid fright at the museum and is worth popping into if it has a low weight, which it typically does by the end of the night. Now, number 7 is A Quiet Place, one of the big IPs for this year's event. So to prepare for this haunted house, I actually watched both of the movies the haunted house is based off of, and I actually loved it. I love these movies. I thought they were really great stories with some tense scenes, great characters, great acting. The aliens are super scary. The house, on the other hand, is kind of just okay. What I think is cool about the Quiet Place haunted house is that the house is genuinely silent. There's lots of ambient noise, there's very little music that's featured in the house, which really bumps up the feeling of dread, especially that first dark hallway that you go through. Also, as I've been going through, I've kind of been giving myself like a Quiet Place challenge of sorts where I'll try not to make a noise as if I'm in the movie. It's a way to add a little extra fun to the house because honestly, the house isn't that scary. For first timers, this house is going to be a really, really good one to do. This is going to be just the right amount of scary, but this house does rely a lot on the Death Angel puppets as the main source of scares, which I think have their moments, but overall are as impactful as like a regular scare, which doesn't really work either because all the people that are coming out at you in this haunted house are the good guys from the movies, you know what I mean? Which is a shame because I usually think puppet scares can be pretty scary, like the lion from Dr. Oddfellow last year or the Chupacabra from 2022. You should try to see this house, but I think out of the 3 big IPs this year, this is the one you could probably get away with skipping if you have to. I haven't seen A Quiet Place Day 1, but if the movie focuses more on like the chaos of the arrival of these creatures, I think that could work better as a haunted house. It's a little bit more exciting. Like I said, I really like the movies, I really like A Quiet Place, and I hope they do it one more time so we can get a little scarier, slightly more exciting haunted house. This next one is definitely getting some mixed responses, but I think a house that sits right in the middle is the Triplets of Terror. This is the Halloween Horror Nights creative team's original take on slashers, and this is a house that, for better or worse, feels like your classic HHN house. It's got a lot of simple scares, but lots of blood and guts. This is definitely the goriest haunted house of the year. And I personally love the design of the Barmy triplets. I think they are pure HHN and it makes me think back to the HHN aesthetic and style of like the early 2000s, especially Harmony's bunny mask look. I think that just like looks so HHN, if that makes sense. But the house does feel kind of short, and there's this kind of random podcast room right in the middle of the haunted house where they talk about the triplets traveling across America every 10 years. And it kind of just makes me wish that that's what the house was. Like you were following them throughout different scenes and different decades, instead of just hearing about it in one room. This haunted house also has what I think is a pretty memorable final room with the bloody birthday party. And of course, how can you forget the haunted house with the dead dog in it? The Triplets of Terror are a trio that I hope make an appearance at Halloween Horror Nights again in the future, and hopefully in a slightly better haunted house. Our next house is not a scary house in my opinion, but it is easily one of the most scenic and impressive. It is Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. This house is a lot of fun and is a perfect fit for newcomers to HHN, those who love seeing what Universal does with IP at the event, and hardcore Ghostbusters fans who love all the movies no matter how lame they might actually be. This house also has the best set pieces at the event, standouts being the Frozen Dining Room, the Ghostbusters Firehouse, and the finale room with an actual Ecto-1 crashing through it. I know some fans don't really like the idea of comedy houses like this one at the event, but I think they're great, and as the event becomes bigger and bigger, I think we're going to have to get more stuff like this in the future. This house focuses more on the spectacle and still manages to cram in some decent scares like the ghost hallway, which always gets me. I also love all the little Stay Puft Marshmallow Men throughout the house. Does anyone know how many there are? Please let me know in the comments. I'd recommend Ghostbusters as a house for those who are visiting for the first time and want a great example of what sets Halloween Horror Nights apart from any other Halloween event. Number 4 is going to be an original haunted house, but it's actually not from Orlando. This house premiered over in Hollywood at their event last year, and it is Monstruos, the monsters of Latin America. This house is basically the bigger Orlando version and is pretty identical in concept and storyline beats to the California one from 2023, which in my opinion was a little scarier, but that is a topic for another video. Luckily for us, both houses are pretty darn scary with the perfect amount of storyline and HHN blood and guts. Points to the team responsible for making this haunted house for also bringing to light some real folklore from Latin American countries and making them extra scary. Sasquatches, Yetis, things like the Chupacabra are ideas that people are already familiar with, so they can lose a little bit of their fear factor because of it. You know, they're just not as scary. But this house introduces us to monsters and legends that are unknown to the majority of visitors. And when you don't know what Talahapuchi, El Silbon, or La Lechuza are capable of doing, it makes things a little scarier, don't you think? The fear of the unknown, right? The scares barely give you a break in this house. The performers aren't afraid to get in your face in this one. And speaking of faces, I hate those big faces that pop out from nowhere, and this house has a really good one towards the end. Top it all off with a giant Lechuza animatronic that actually makes it the first one used at HHN Orlando. You'll soon realize that the grave at the end of this house is truly for Jew. That's how he says it at the end of the haunted house. He goes, for Jew. Number 3 is a house, if you could believe, I didn't really feel super strongly about at the start of this event. I thought it was like too similar to the previous version of it, but after going through multiple times, it is clear to see that Slaughter Cinema 2 is wonderful. It is a really great house. Slaughter Cinema 2 has the spirit of the first Slaughter Cinema and the spirit of pre-2020 HHN in this house, and it is a must-do when you visit this year's event. This house is like the perfect coffee blend of humor and edginess that a lot of HHN houses used to have back in the day that honestly, you don't really see much of anymore. This house is packed with variety and scares, and the performers in here are kicking butt. Some rooms are gross, like the Mardi Gras murders, some are actually scary, like the Night of the Undead Clowns, and some are just plain cool, like Blood and Chum, which, by the way, I hope becomes a full-on Jaws haunted house in the future, please. Even though I thought the movies from the first house were a little cooler, a little better, Slaughter Cinema 2 is a night at the movies you won't forget. Speaking of pure HHN houses, Goblin's Feast has really crept up on me as one of my favorites for this year. This house shows off what HHN does best, which is get concepts and ideas you wouldn't expect to see as a haunted house and make them super fun and scary. This house feels a little silly at first, but the performers in here make up for it with some great energy that once again juggles the playfulness and scariness of a haunted house perfectly. Goblin's Feast also has some really big sets, which I love, and it utilizes the brand new tent space in a great way that gets me excited to see what future houses in here will look like. The story is also incredibly easy to follow, which is perfect for all manner of guests going through the house. They are goblins, and they're trying to eat you. You are the Goblin's Feast. There are some really great scares with an impressive Goblin King puppet at the end, but if I could make one complaint about this house, why is the best costume at the absolute end? And why do I have to turn completely around to see it? This is a recurring problem in a lot of houses this year, and I hope it gets fixed next year. But yes, Goblin's Feast is a meal you don't want to skip out on, even though it might kill you. And last, but certainly not least, is a house that is leaps and bounds the MVP of 2024. You know it. It is Insidious the Further. This is a house that is going to be talked about for a good long while with HHN fans, and for those who just started their Horror Nights journey, this will sit among some of the best houses of the modern generation, right up there with Dead Man's Pier and Wicked Growth. You see, all the other houses this year, while having some scary moments, don't take themselves as seriously as Insidious. There's no whimsy or fun going through this house. It is dark, it is grim, it features some of the most effective and intense scares at HHN 33. What do people hate? Mannequin rooms. There's 2 in this house. And what else do people hate? Curtain hallways. The entire finale of this house features them. Each room has performers that will pop out at you, and these guys definitely know they're in the house of the year because they are bringing their A game to freak you out. I get scared every single time I go through this house. The best part of this house, though, has to be towards the end when you enter the red-faced demon's world and he's popping out from every corner. It feels like there's like 10 people in there stalking you. But did you know there's only like 3 people in there? Crazy, right? Seriously, I don't know what else I can say about Insidious other than that this house is leaving people shook. If you could only do one house this year, it needs to be Insidious the Further. This house is going into the HHN history books. Well, there you have it, folks. That is my list for the top 10 best and worst haunted houses of Halloween Horror Nights 2024. What do you think? How does this compare to your list? What do you guys think of the haunted houses this year? What do you think of the event in general this year? I think there's a lot worth talking about. I'd love to hear it in the comments down below. Thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're looking to support me a little extra further, please consider joining my Patreon like all these wonderful people here. And for the rest of you, and those guys too, I will see you at the next video. Watch out.